Hey guys, tonight we ride across the open steppe under a sky so thick with stars it feels like you could scoop them into your hands. The air is thin, cold enough to nip at your nostrils, and the only sound is the rhythmic crunch of hooves on frozen grass. You're bundled in layers of sheepskin, one hand on the reins, the other clutching a tightly sealed message, written in a language you can't read, addressed to someone you'll never meet. It's just another shift in the Mongol Empire's legendary postal relay system. No pressure, right? Except there is pressure. You're part of the biggest information network the world has ever known up to this point. Miss your station and you don't just lose your job. You might get a very stern letter from the Khan himself. One that involves, let's say, career-ending implications. You probably won't survive this, but let's not dwell on that just yet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind picks up as your horse crests a low rise. Ahead, a faint orange glow marks your next postal station, still several miles away. It's one of hundreds dotting the empire like fireflies frozen in time. But tonight, it's just you, the message, and the cold. The relay system, called the Yam, was the brainchild of Genghis Khan himself. Think of it as the 13th century version of fiber optics, only fuzzier and with more horse manure. It connected the sprawling territories of the Mongol Empire, from the forests of Siberia to the rice paddies of China, the bazaars of Persia to the snowy peaks near Hungary. And it did this with remarkable efficiency. But it wasn't just about speed, it was about consistency. Mongol messages could travel up to 200 miles a day, thanks to a network of stations roughly every 25 to 30 miles apart. Each had fresh horses, warm food, well, warmish, and someone to take the message and ride on. Kind of like a relay race, except the baton is a scroll sealed with wax, and the runners wear fur and carry knives. You reach the station just after midnight. A yurt, round, low, and dimly lit from within, waits in the center of a small corral. You're greeted not by a person, but by a barking dog, who clearly doesn't care that you've just ridden for 6 hours straight. The station master emerges from the shadows, yawning, scratching something that probably shouldn't be scratched in public. He doesn't say much, just takes the message, hands you a bowl of soupy millet, and disappears inside. You'll sleep here for 2 hours before turning back east with a reply. Historians still argue whether the Yam was inspired by earlier systems, like the Persian Ingarium or the Chinese imperial couriers. Some say Genghis borrowed ideas from every culture he conquered and mashed them together with a side of Mongol pragmatism. Others argue it was uniquely homegrown, a natural outgrowth of the nomadic lifestyle. After all, no one understands distance, weather, and saddle soreness quite like the Mongols. You lean back against a pile of goat skins, spooning in mouthfuls of millet that tastes like it was boiled last week. It's salty, bland, and comforting in a way only travel food can be. Outside, the wind whistles through the yurt's felt walls, and your horse drinks from a nearby trough, steam rising from its flanks. You make a mental note to check its hooves before dawn. Mongol horses are sturdy, but even they can't gallop on cracked ice forever. Quirky fact, Mongol messengers often rode with 2 to 3 horses at once, switching between them without fully dismounting. Yes, that means you were expected to leap between galloping animals while carrying top-secret intelligence and not spill your fermented mare's milk. Eat your heart out, Jasonborn. You lie back and let the fire's warmth creep into your boots. Sleep teases the edges of your vision. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, another rider like you is doing the same thing, waiting for the next leg of the relay. And somewhere even farther, a general reads a message that left your fingers just 3 days ago, perhaps ordering troops, perhaps announcing a royal birth, or maybe just asking for more yaks. This system, running like clockwork in an age without clocks, is what held the Mongol Empire together. Armies moved in response to fresh intelligence. Trade routes stayed open thanks to timely warnings. Alliances lived or died by the speed of the courier. The Yam wasn't just mail, it was the Empire's bloodstream. And tonight, you're a red blood cell with frostbite. You're up before the sun, not that you slept much. The yurt's floor is warm in patches where the goats curled up, and your dreams were full of hooves and never-ending plains. You chew a strip of dried meat as you saddle your horse, already feeling the familiar ache in your thighs that says you've been doing this job too long. But there's a fresh message tucked into your coat now, sealed with a new insignia, this time from a local governor in Karakoram, bound for a commander several hundred miles west. The wind is sharper this morning. Your horse snorts, impatient to move. You mount and push forward into the pale gray dawn. Somewhere behind you, the station fades into the landscape, indistinguishable from the hills and snow, and the occasional confused marmot. Let's talk about Genghis Khan for a second, not the conquering, arrow-slinging, empire-smashing side everyone knows, but Genghis the administrator. See, when he wasn't flattening cities or rewriting family trees across continents, the man had a real gift for logistics. He knew that no matter how many warriors you have, an empire lives or dies by information. And the faster that information moves, the more alive your empire stays. So, sometime around the early 1200s, Genghis starts laying out a plan, a vast relay system of postal stations or tage spaced just far enough apart that a fresh horse could gallop between them without collapsing. Every station stocked food, fodder, guards, and at least one grumpy teenager to shovel dung. Each messenger, called a Yanchi, carried official messages in leather satchels, protected from rain, sleet, and the occasional jealous hawk. These weren't just any riders. They were selected for their endurance, their loyalty, and sometimes their complete disregard for personal safety. You had to be okay with sleeping upright in a saddle and crossing bandit-infested mountain passes with a message that might just say meeting postponed. You press onward, your breath fogging up before you. The horse's pace is steady, rhythmic. You pass a pair of wild camels staring at you like you've borrowed their laundry. In the distance, a hawk wheels over the ridge, tracing lazy spirals in the air. It's almost peaceful if you ignore the bone-deep fatigue and your slowly freezing toes. Mainstream historians estimate the Yam network stretched for over 25,000 miles at its peak. Let that sink in. 25,000 miles of coordinated communication in an age when most people never traveled more than 10 miles from where they were born. That's more than the length of the Great Wall of China and a couple of bonus laps around the Mediterranean thrown in. And the best part? It mostly worked. But here's where things get juicy. Not everyone thought this was a great idea. Some local rulers resented the constant stream of messengers demanding fresh horses and free meals. There are reports of governors refusing to support the system until they received a follow-up message from the Khan, usually involving creative metaphors about disobedience and sharpened stakes. Let's just say non-compliance was discouraged with enthusiastic consistency. Now, one scholarly debate that still has historians swapping footnotes at conferences is just how centralized the Yam system really was. Some argue it was a strictly top-down machine, regulated from the capital with ruthless efficiency. Others think it was more like a well-fed web, with each node adapting to local conditions, kind of like a medieval version of franchising. You know, this relay station brought to you by Badakon's excellent goat emporium. The sun rises reluctantly, casting a faint gold over the hills. Your next station is a few miles off, nestled in a low valley near a frozen creek. You're looking forward to a nap, maybe even a cup of that sour milk tea if it's your lucky day. You shift in the saddle, stretching your legs one at a time, trying to coax feeling back into your knees. You pass a broken wagon, half buried in snow. Probably a trader who tried to beat the cold and didn't make it. You dismount briefly to check. No bodies, just a shattered axle and a bundle of silk. You make a mental note to report it at the station, but chances are someone already scavenged the best parts. Here's your quirky tidbit for today. Some messages in the Yam system were written in knot code, strings tied in particular patterns to represent words, similar to the quipu of the Inca. We don't have many surviving examples, but contemporary reports mention them, particularly in areas where literacy was low or messaging had to stay secret. Imagine being the poor soul who untangles your boss's memo and realizes you've accidentally declared war on the neighbor. By now, your horse's ears perk up. It smells the other horses at the next station. You feel it speed up slightly, sensing food and rest ahead. You adjust your grip on the reins, bracing as the trail dips into a rough patch of frozen mud. This, you think, is probably the least glamorous way to hold an empire together. But somehow it works. The station comes into view. Another yurt, smoke curling from its chimney. A low wooden fence encircling a few bundled haystacks and half-sleeping horses. A bored-looking child waves at you, mostly out of obligation. The station master is already outside, a tall woman with a thick braid and a heavier coat than yours. She takes your message, scans it briefly, and then jerks her chin toward the food tent. No words exchanged. You're both too cold, and this dance is well rehearsed. You dismount, stretch, and limp inside, fingers tingling. A fresh horse is already being readied. You have 20 minutes to eat, drink, maybe sneak in a nap, then you're off again. Because somewhere far ahead, another fire waits, another message changes hands, and another piece of the empire stays miraculously stitched together. You wake up with millet in your mouth and hay in your hair. Someone's nudging your foot with theirs, gently but insistently. Time to move. You blink the sleep from your eyes, slap some life back into your limbs, and stumble out into the pale sun. The station master hands you a new message, this one bearing the red wax seal of the imperial court. No pressure. She doesn't say anything, just gives you a nod that means, don't drop it, don't read it, don't die. The horse is already saddled. A sturdy bay mare this time, broad-shouldered and suspiciously smarter than you. She sizes you up like she's calculating your IQ and quietly judging your posture. You swing into the saddle, tighten your coat, and take a breath that smells like firewood, cold iron, and something vaguely pickled. You ride west now, toward more open land. The grasslands ripple like velvet under a breeze, and your mare sets off at a brisk trot, already knowing the rhythm of this route. You fall into it too. The yam isn't just a job, it's a muscle memory, a mindset, a life. You go when told, stop when fed, sleep when nothing is on fire. And then you go again. Now, here's something you probably haven't thought about while dozing off to Mongol logistics. Postal yurts weren't just stations, they were tiny hubs of empire maintenance. Each one was part post office, part barracks, part emergency Airbnb for nobility who got lost during their travels. They weren't all yurts either. Some were wooden structures, some were simple waymarkers with supplies buried nearby. In more permanent settlements, the stations were elaborate complexes with stables, bathhouses, and even clerks who kept rough logs. Imagine a rest stop on the Silk Road with slightly more goats and significantly fewer vending machines. What's wild is how standardized it all became. Riders received official tablets, peza, that showed they were government messengers. These ranged from iron for the lower ranks to gold for VIP couriers. Flash a golden peza at a station, and the staff would drop everything to serve you, including their dinner. You, however, have the copper kind. Still respected, but let's just say no one's giving up their dumplings for you. Your mare clips over a shallow stream, hooves clacking against smooth stone. The road here is more suggestion than structure, just flattened grass and the occasional cairn. You keep your eyes peeled for the next marker, a half-buried totem carved with old runes. Once you spot it, you know you're within 10 miles of your next stop. Mainstream accounts like Marco Polo's describe how even foreign envoys were allowed to use the yam if they had the proper documents. He called it the most efficient system he'd ever seen, and considering the man once rode a camel across the Gobi Desert, that's saying something. His writings describe these stations as being stocked with thousands of horses. And while historians suspect he may have exaggerated the numbers, Marco did love his flair. There's solid evidence that the bigger stations kept over 200 horses on standby, with entire families dedicated to their care. You reach a ridge and pause, giving your mare a break and scanning the landscape. Below, a river winds through the grass like a silver ribbon. On the other side, the glint of yurts, your next stop. Just beyond them, you can make out plumes of dust. Another courier, maybe? Or just a herd of sheep getting rowdy. It's hard to tell from here, and frankly, it's not your problem unless they start mailing things. Quirky detail time. In some areas, stations use trained falcons to assist with short-range messaging. Not quite the avian express you'd hope for. More like a delivery pigeon with attitude. But they were faster than a horse over rough terrain and occasionally useful in emergencies. That said, falcons were expensive to train, and one angry one could ruin your week. Still, somewhere out there, a very dignified falcon once flew a message to a governor about his unpaid taxes. History's weird like that. You urge your horse down the slope, following a worn trail that snakes along the river. The sun's climbing now, warming your back. You smell wet grass and hear the buzz of insects waking up. Everything feels calm, until your mare suddenly stops. She stiffens, ears flicking. You hear something too, voices, hushed and close. You slide off quietly and duck behind a rock. Bandits? Local hunters? traveling musicians with exceptionally bad timing. You squint through the grass and spot two men huddled near a bush, clearly trying to stay out of sight. One holds a bow, the other has a sack. You grip your reins, ready to bolt. But just then, they spot you. One makes a gesture, not threatening, just annoyed, and they melt into the brush, vanishing like smoke. You wait another minute, then remount and ride on, pulse thumping. The yam is fast, yes, but it's not invincible. Historians still debate how vulnerable the system really was. Some say the tight control of the Mongol army made roads safer than anywhere else in the medieval world. Others argue that outside the main routes, things got sketchy fast. Local resistance movements, disgruntled bandits, even wolves could interrupt the flow of information. It wasn't foolproof, but considering the scale of the empire, it was shockingly robust. By the time you reach the next station, your adrenaline's worn off and your thighs hate you again. The station keeper, an old man with a limp and the best mustache you've ever seen, gives you a nod and a bowl of something steaming. You hand off the message, and he grins. "From the Khan?" he asks. You shrug. You didn't look. Not your job. You rest a bit, tending to the mare's hooves, which are caked with mud and tiny rocks. Then, just as you're about to close your eyes, another rider gallops in from the east. She's young, breathless, and covered in dust. She tosses her reins at the stable boy, pulls out a message, and collapses on a blanket without a word. You share a look. No words needed. The empire hums, and you are a part of it. The wind starts to change as you ride on, pulling faint hints of pine and distant smoke into the endless sea of grass. You're leaving the wide, open steppes behind and approaching more mountainous terrain now, somewhere near the Altai, perhaps. You've stopped tracking the days. In yam life, time bends around duty. You don't count hours. You measure distance in hoofbeats, meals, and the number of horses you've worn out. The message pouch slaps lightly against your hip as you ride, its leather warmed by the sun. You've been entrusted with messages ranging from tax documents to personal letters to imperial decrees written in crushed lapis lazuli ink. Gorgeous, unreadable, and probably worth more than your entire family's goat herd. Today's package? You're not sure. You're just the legs. Here's something oddly fascinating. Mongol postal riders like you were technically military personnel, not just messengers. You weren't just delivering news. You were part of the intelligence web that kept the empire breathing. If someone along the way spotted a brewing rebellion, a suspicious merchant, or a plague outbreak, the yam was the alarm system. So while the messages themselves were vital, what really mattered was the rhythm, how quickly information pulsed through the body of the empire. Of course, not every message was dramatic. Some were glorified shopping lists from nobles with too much money and too little to do. Send more rhubarb wine. The silk shipment was the wrong shade of green. One scribe once scribbled a passive-aggressive note about yak while being too coarse, evidence that even in the 13th century, people loved to complain about customer service. The yurt stations adapted accordingly. As the Mongol Empire expanded across Asia, the network stretched like veins across the land. Stations popped up in forests, deserts, river valleys, and mountain passes. Each region shaped the yurts differently. In the steppes, felted round structures stayed low to the ground to avoid wind damage. In colder areas, yurts were reinforced with extra insulation, layers of wool, bark, and even snow-packed walls. You spot one of those thicker, snow-ready yurts now, nestled between two pine-covered slopes. Smoke curls from its chimney, and a tethered line of shaggy ponies flick their tails at flies. The station keeper's daughter is chopping wood in front, pausing to wipe her brow with a gesture so practiced it's practically ceremonial. She waves when she sees you. Clearly, news doesn't outrun you by much here. You wave back, give your horse a grateful pat, and dismount. Inside the yurt, it's warm, dim, and smells like yak butter tea, pine resin, and smoked lamb. The station keeper, an older woman with piercing eyes and a voice like gravel, takes your peza and squints at it. You again, she says flatly. Didn't you ride through here last week with that urgent note about the plague in Beshbalik? You nod. Different note this time. Still urgent. You shrug. Aren't they all? You sit by the fire while someone brings you tea thick enough to spoon upright. You sip. It's awful. It's perfect. Quirky sidebar. Some Mongol stations kept message dogs not for long-distance runs. but for emergency weather runs during snowstorms when horses refused to budge. These weren't the happy tail-wagging kind either. These were mean, barrel-chested monsters bred for survival. Imagine a St. Bernard mixed with a grizzly bear, and you're in the ballpark. You curl up by the fire for a short nap, just long enough to regain your senses. The station keeper places a fresh message pouch beside you. Your return leg is ready. You nod your thanks, stretch your stiff legs, and head back outside where your next horse waits. Historians still argue whether the Yam was the first truly modern postal network. Some claim earlier systems in Persia and China predated in complexity. But what makes the Yam stand out is its military precision and sheer geographic sprawl stretching from Korea to Eastern Europe. No one else had combined scale with speed like this before. The Mongols didn't invent the concept, but they industrialized it with terrifying efficiency. And it wasn't just humans who traveled the routes. Mongol intelligence used the Yam to transport carrier pigeons, trained to fly back to central locations. Their messages were typically ultra-short, urgent alerts written on rice paper and tied to their tiny legs. One legend claims a pigeon once carried news of an impending revolt from the mountains of Armenia all the way to Karakorum. Is it true? Hard to say. But if birds could unionize, the Yam would have had some serious negotiations on its hands. You mount again and head into the hills. The trail narrows, flanked by mossy rocks and whispering trees. Your new horse is nimble but grumpy. He snorts at every squirrel and glares at birds. You bond instantly. It's comforting, in a way, knowing every horse has a personality. Some are eager, some aloof, and some, like this one, have deep philosophical objections to water crossings. You coax him over a stream, mostly with bribes of dried apples, and pick up the pace. The message is sealed with blue wax this time, probably regional affairs. Someone's marriage? Land negotiations? A polite request to stop letting goats roam into neighboring provinces? Night falls gently as you reach the next ridge. You dismount to give the horse a break and chew on a strip of salted meat that tastes like regret. Overhead, stars blink into existence, scattered across the sky like spilled silver. You realize you haven't spoken to another person all day. The silence is thick, soothing, and slightly unsettling. You think about the others riding this same network, across deserts, forests, coasts. You're just one nerve in this massive, twitching empire. And yet, here you are, alone, watching your breath curl in the cold air, waiting for the next yurt to appear like a beacon in the dark. A faint glow pierces the distant dark. You squint. There it is, a speck of amber tucked into the slope like a secret. Another yurt. Another fire. Another stretch of earth behind you. Your current horse exhales like it's sighing in relief. You reach down and pat its neck, murmuring thanks. The two of you descend quietly, hooves muffled by the damp ground. This station is quieter than most. No bustling handlers, no tethered herd. Just a soft murmur of wind in the trees and the rhythmic creak of the door as it opens. A tall figure in layered furs greets you with a slow nod. He doesn't speak, just gestures toward the fire. You follow. Inside, it's dim and cozy. The fire burns low, but the warmth is instant, sinking into your bones like a sigh. The yurt's central pole is hung with odd trinkets, small carved animals, strings of dried fruit, and what appears to be a tiny metal bell that jingles faintly when the door moves. It's these personal touches, you realize, that make every station different, even though they all technically serve the same purpose. As you settle in with another painfully strong tea, you notice the walls here are lined with maps. Not the royal kind, these are hand-sketched, drawn with ink and guesswork. Trails crisscrossed with charcoal smudges, side routes noted in scratchy shorthand. It hits you. These riders and station keepers were more than messengers. They were the living GPS of the Mongol world. If anyone knew where the frozen river crossings were safe, or which hill had the friendliest wolves, yes, you heard that right, it was them. One map shows a detour through a region labeled only as bad idea. You decide not to ask. With the fire crackling beside you, you take a moment to examine your gear. Your satchel is scuffed but intact. The message pouch is still sealed. And the all-important peza, a small tablet of authority inscribed with Mongol script, sits safely inside your vest. It's your passport, your badge, your one get-out-of-jail card across 1,000 miles of unpredictable wilderness. Lose it, and you might as well be a goat thief wandering aimlessly. The quiet station keeper finally speaks. Heading west. You nod. As far as the river's bend. He grunts. Take the North Trail. Southern bridge collapsed. Ice gave way last week. You file that away. One more invisible update in this living, breathing network. That's how the Yam kept functioning. Information flowed not just through letters, but through people, stories, observations. No memo needed, just shared knowledge passed along like bread. Historians still argue whether every station had a permanent keeper or if some rotated with seasonal migrations. Records are sketchy. Some yurts may have doubled as family homes, others as temporary military outposts. What's agreed upon, though, is that the logistics were staggering: over 1,400 relay stations across the empire, each stocked with spare horses, food, beds, and sometimes even local entertainers to cheer up weary riders. Speaking of entertainment, your host produces something unexpected: a small, two-string morin-kuer, or horsehead fiddle. He plucks a slow, haunting tune, and for a moment, time slips sideways. The sound is raw and beautiful, like wind on water. You don't understand the melody, but it lingers in your chest long after the strings go still. You thank him with a nod and get ready to leave. He hands you a packet of dried cheese cubes. "Long stretch ahead," he says. "You'll need teeth like iron." You mount a fresh horse, one with alert eyes and a slightly sarcastic whinny, and head into the dark. The cold has sharpened. Your breath puffs in silver clouds. The stars overhead are brighter now, clearer. Out here, with no cities to dim them, the night sky becomes your ceiling, your compass, and your company. The trail winds upward. Your new horse seems to know the way. These animals are half memory, half muscle. You let him choose the path, trusting that his hooves remember what your tired brain does not. And then you notice it, up ahead, caught in the moonlight. A wolf, standing still on the path, watching. Your horse freezes. So do you. The wolf doesn't growl, doesn't move, just stares for a long, heavy breath. Then it turns and walks away into the underbrush, as if to say, "You're not the story tonight." You ride on. The next station is far. No firelight on the horizon yet. Just you, the horse, the dark. You chew a cheese cube and immediately regret it. It's like biting a brick made of salty chalk. But it's food, and food is energy, and energy is survival. And survival is the yam's secret trick. It wasn't just built on horses and yurts. It was built on adaptability. Need to cross a flooded plain? Someone's mapped a canoe detour. Too many thieves on the southern road? A northern trail appears overnight. One year, a particularly clever station keeper in the Gobi started using camels instead of horses for sandy terrain. The idea caught on. Soon entire southern routes were camel-reliant. You cross into a low valley just as dawn begins to smudge the sky with pale gold. Somewhere behind you, the last station fades from view. Somewhere ahead, another yurt waits with food, fire, and yet another ride. You're tired. Your back aches. Your legs feel like someone else's. But the message moves forward. And so do you. The sun peaks over the ridge just as your horse begins to slow, nostrils flaring with steam, hooves crunching over a thin skin of frost. Dawn of the steppes arrives without ceremony. No chorus of birds, no bustling of cities waking up, just light, gradual and indifferent, stretching across the cold, flat world like a sleepy yawn. You lean forward, stroking the horse's neck in thanks. Another leg complete. The next yurt appears like a mirage, just a smear of fabric and smoke curling into the pale sky. As you approach, two children scamper out barefoot, in this weather, giggling as they chase a goat that clearly wants no part of their morning enthusiasm. Behind them, a woman leans out of the yurt flap, sees you, and nods. Without a word, she disappears back inside. 10 seconds later, steam rises from a fresh pot of milk tea. You're expected. You dismount stiffly, grateful your knees are still functioning. Inside, the yurt smells of toasted barley and sour cream. The woman hands you a wooden bowl and gestures toward the fire. Breakfast is tsampa, a barley flour mash mixed with tea and butter. It's like eating warm gravel, but after riding all night, it feels like a feast. While you eat, the husband enters, wiping his hands on a length of felt. "You're the third this week," he mutters. "All heading west. Something brewing." You shrug. You don't know. You're just the messenger. And that's what makes the system so fascinating. Riders often had no idea what they were carrying. Many of the messages were sealed with wax, locked inside leather pouches, marked with the unmistakable authority of the Khan. Military reports? Trade negotiations? Spicy gossip between cousins in Karakoram? Could be anything. You just ride. One station keeper once confessed that the biggest temptation was not stealing the horses, but cracking open the messages. "Just a peek," he said. "Just once." But the penalty was severe, and the honor system, even in a land without fences, ran deep. The Mongols didn't need cameras or checkpoints. They had a word for their code, nam, a sort of moral law. Break the system, and the system breaks you. Historians still argue whether the yam was more about control or convenience. Was it truly for the people, or was it just another leash tied to the imperial fist? But one thing's certain, it worked. With staggering efficiency. A message could leave Karakorum and reach the Caspian Sea in a couple of weeks, a miracle in an age when most empires thought fast meant a month without a mutiny. As you sip the last of your tea, you notice something hanging near the door, a row of bone tokens, each etched with marks you don't recognize. The station keeper catches your glance. Routzy says, "My father's. His father's. Back when the wolves ran thicker than mail." You nod, quietly awed. These aren't just delivery hubs. They're archives of movement, memory, and adaptation. And each keeper, each rider, adds another thread to the tapestry. Outside, the wind has shifted. Colder now. The clouds have gathered thick and gray, like a slow argument forming overhead. The station keeper offers you a fur hood, stitched from fox and lined with wool. "Snow by nightfall," he says. "Take this. Your ears thank you." You accept, pull it over your head, and mount a fresh horse. This one is shorter but sturdier, with the gait of something bred for bad decisions and worse weather. You nod your thanks, then ride on, westward, where the wind is sharper and the clouds brood darker. After a few miles, the terrain changes. You enter a valley where trees replace grass, tall, whispering firs that lean in like nosy neighbors. The trail narrows, twisting with the river. You keep an eye out for markers, painted stones, snapped branches, or piles of wolf dung, each one a breadcrumb from a previous rider. The silence here is louder. You start humming tunelessly, have to keep yourself company, have to ward off whatever's watching from the trees. Riders used to carry charms for luck. Small bones, bits of fabric, or teeth on leather cords. You carry only a small pouch of salt. It's supposed to confuse spirits, or attract deer. No one's really sure. Then, without warning, your horse stops. Ears up, nostrils twitching. You wait. Moments later, the source appears, a man on foot, limping, cloak torn, eyes wild. He sees you, raises a hand, not in greeting, but in surrender. His voice is ragged. "Bandits. 2 valleys back. Took everything." You dismount carefully, offering him water. His hands shake as he drinks. The Mongol network, you realize, wasn't always safe. Even with imperial protection, the vastness of the steppe left room for chaos. Some riders traveled in pairs. Others disguised themselves as shepherds. A few even memorized dummy routes to trick would-be thieves into chasing the wrong trail. You give the man your old horse, the one waiting patiently for its next rider. "Follow the river east," you tell him. "There's a station by the fork. They'll feed you." He nods, too exhausted to thank you properly. As you continue west on your fresh mount, you feel a little lighter. Not because of the lost horse or the wind behind you, but because you're part of something. A chain, a rhythm, a living artery that stretches farther than your own story. The river bends. Snow begins to fall soft, lazy flakes that catch on your lashes. You pull the fox hood tighter and lean into the ride. The path ahead winds upward again, the horizon blurred by the curtain of white. Somewhere beyond that ridge, another yurt waits. Another bowl of tea. Another stretch of silence and hooves. And you still riding, still nameless, still moving forward. You wake to the smell of warm milk and with smoke. The storm must have hit hard while you slept, because now the world outside your borrowed yurt is blinding white. Snow carpets everything, softening the harsh lines of the steppe into something that looks almost gentle. You stretch, every joint reminding you that horseback naps are not a long-term strategy. The station keeper's daughter hands you a hunk of dried cheese and a fresh wrap of felt for your boots. She says nothing, but her smirk says plenty. Riders, apparently, always look ridiculous when they first wake up. You thank her with a nod and step outside, greeted by a light that reflects from every direction. The horizon's gone, swallowed in a bowl of sky and snow. Mounting your next horse, a thick-coated bay who looks like he's wrestled wolves and won, you set off again, grateful for the traction of its wide hoofs. This stretch of the yam runs parallel to a frozen river, now just a glinting ribbon flanked by low willows. In summer, these waters are impassable without a boat or a prayer. In winter, they become express lanes for hooves and sleds. Not that you're using a sled today. You're still on the fast circuit, the urgent route reserved for riders carrying top priority dispatches. Occasionally, the Khan himself would mark messages as "Urchui you are," a phrase that meant faster than the wind. Riders bearing these seals could commandeer any horse, demand fresh food, and ride through any storm. It was an honor, and a curse. There are stories, probably exaggerated, of riders collapsing from exhaustion just feet from the final station, their hands still clutching the sealed pouch. But today, there's no war to warn about. No crisis. Just your quiet presence on a quiet path, carrying what could be the most important message of the decade, or a simple letter reminding someone in Bokhara to send more goat cheese to the court. Still, it's the system that matters. The rhythm. You pass another rider headed east. You exchange nods, nothing more. You're not meant to linger. But you catch the glint of something peculiar hanging from his saddle, a small copper bell. An old signal used during the early decades of the Yam, when riders would alert stations by ringing the bell on approach. Some kept it for tradition. Others claimed it warned off spirits, wolves, and overly curious foxes. Historians still debate where the bell tradition began. Some say it was borrowed from the Tang dynasty's postal scouts. Others believe it originated much earlier, with nomadic shamans who believed sound could cut through evil winds. As you ride, the terrain changes again. Hills now, dotted with black rocks and tufts of stubborn grass poking through the snow. You spot the ruins of an old watchtower, half swallowed by frost and time. The walls are collapsed, but the iron ring where a beacon once hung still remains, crusted with rust. You imagine the fires that once roared there, signaling Mongol victories, or threats, or simple arrival. The Empire's nervous system wasn't just made of riders and stations. It had eyes, towers, scouts, and sometimes even trained falcons to deliver small messages across enemy lines. The Mongols weren't the first to try long-distance communication. The Persians had couriers. The Chinese had relay stations. But no one had pushed it quite this far, this fast, over terrain this unforgiving. And all without paper maps. That's right, no paper maps. Riders memorized their routes by heart. Every ridge, every crooked tree, every salt spring. They didn't navigate, they remembered. It was oral cartography, passed down like a song. And yes, sometimes they got lost. There are still tales whispered about riders who veered too far north, ended up in marshlands, and were adopted by herring colonies. Okay, that one's probably not true, but it does make you wonder what strange stories live in the bones of this land. The wind picks up. You tuck your scarf tighter and press forward. The next yurt is farther than usual, a deep station, meant for isolated terrain. These were stocked more heavily, sometimes even fortified with wooden palisades if the region was known for bandit trouble or wild tigers. Yes, tigers. The eastern Yam routes sometimes skirted Manchurian forests, where big cats weren't just metaphors for danger. One record mentions a station keeper losing 2 goats and a sleeve to the same cat in 1 week. He kept the paw as a trophy, wore it like a mitten in winter. After what feels like forever, you see smoke. Then a flag, striped red and black, fluttering against the snow. A signal that this station is under imperial service and safe. You breathe easier. As you ride in, the station keeper gives you a tired salute and holds up his hand, counting fingers. 3. He's checking your state. Number of fingers visible means you haven't lost them to frostbite. Always a good sign. Inside, the yurt is warm, packed with supplies. A bunch of dried herbs hang from the ceiling, releasing a sharp, peppery scent. Not just for cooking, they double as insect repellents and, in a pinch, as makeshift tea. The keeper hands you a bowl of yak butter stew, thicker than gravy, and insists you take your boots off. Your toes tingle, grateful and possibly betrayed. As you eat, he tells you about a new trail being marked 2 valleys south, less prone to avalanche, supposedly. But he's skeptical. Every time they change the route, he grumbles, some poor fool ends up riding in circles for days. Once had a guy show up here with a goose strapped to his back and no idea why. You laugh, half out of politeness, half because the image is impossible to resist. A goose. Strapped. Why not? As you finish your meal, the keeper reaches under a cushion and pulls out a bone flute. He plays a few slow notes, mournful, reedy, ancient. It's not entertainment. It's ritual. Some stations believe music kept the spirits of old riders company, so they wouldn't follow you out when you left. You thank him, rest a few more hours, then gather your things. Outside, the snow has softened, becoming slush. The air is warming, barely. You mount the horse again, taller, leaner, clearly bred for speed, and head toward the narrowing valley beyond. The path continues, and so do you. The snow melts into slush under your horse's hooves, and the valley yawns ahead, narrowing first, then widening again like a deep exhale from the land itself. You adjust the pouch strap to your waist, checking that the seal is still intact. It is. Red wax, slightly smudged, but unbroken. The message, whatever it is, has survived another leg. As you ride, the hills shift subtly. Rocks turn redder. The trees, sparse as they are, tilt differently, shaped by different winds. You've crossed a line you can't see on any map, but the yam knows it. Every few hundred versts, the stations change flavor. Language, food, architecture. 1,000 small adjustments that speak to the staggering reach of the Mongol Empire. This next stretch? Persian influence. You catch the scent before you see the outpost, saffron and cardamom, drifting lazily on the breeze. You don't even care that it's mostly horse sweat and lentils. After weeks of boiled yak, this smells like luxury. You arrive at the next station just as the sun begins to dip, casting the landscape in syrupy amber. This yurt is rectangular, more like a hybrid between nomad tent and caravanserai, with wooden beams reinforcing its frame. The keeper greets you with a lazy grin and a mug of something called fermented camel milk. You drink it, regret it, politely ask for water. As you rest, you hear them, voices chanting rhythmically outside. Turns out, it's the relay singers, a tradition here. These men memorize news from the court, then sing it across stations until it's replaced by fresher verses. Think of it as the empire's gossip chain, if gossip could ride a horse and carry state secrets. It's oral tradition woven into logistics, a method both beautiful and disturbingly effective. Historians still argue whether these singers actually improved communication or just added a layer of poetic confusion. One famous incident involved a message about raising taxes arriving as a ballad about a talking goat. Oops. Back inside, the keeper rolls out a thick woolen mat for you. He's proud of it. It came from Bokhara, dyed with crushed pomegranates and traded 3 horses deep. You sink into it like a boulder into soft earth. But you don't sleep yet. Because tonight, you're switching roles. The message you carry isn't just passing through this station. It's being copied, summarized, and resent east via a different rider. And you? You're to take a fresh message south, into unfamiliar territory. It's all part of the Mongol efficiency, redundancy, and rerouting kept the system resilient. No single rider ever bore the whole burden. It was a relay, a living algorithm, long before we had the word for it. Still, this means paperwork. Yes, even in the 13th century, paperwork waits. The station keeper hands you a slim wooden tablet, coated in hardened wax. You're to inscribe the message using a stylus. One slip, and it's ruined. There's no backspace here. You steady your hand, adjust the candle, and begin. The message is short. A trade dispute in Samarkand. A delay in grain caravans. Something about a missing interpreter who may or may not have fled with someone's second wife. You don't ask questions. You just press each syllable into wax like it's a prayer. Once done, the tablet is sealed again, this time inside a goatskin pouch lined with pine resin to keep it waterproof. Not fireproof, mind you, but that's why you make copies. 3 riders will leave tonight with the same message, each on a different path. Only one needs to make it. You step outside into the cooling dusk. Stars blink to life above you, scattered, unfamiliar constellations. You spot the rider's belt, a set of 3 stars Mongol messengers swore by. If you're ever lost, follow the belt until it kisses the horizon. Then turn left. It's not on any map, but every rider knows it. You mount your new horse, a gray mare this time, surprisingly elegant, and set off southward. Your breath fogs in front of you, joining the mist rising from the river. You pass a merchant caravan huddled in for the night. They nod, recognizing your pouch, but say nothing. Riders had a strange social rank, not noble, but not common. More like monks of momentum. Everyone respected your silence. The road narrows again, turning rocky. Somewhere to your left, a jackal howls. Your horse flinches. You whisper something calming, nonsense syllables. Really, but it seems to help. A few hours in, you stop by a ghost station. That's what they call outposts that fell out of use. This one's half collapsed, roof caved in, walls split by a sapling that grew straight through its center like a flagpole. You walk around it, out of curiosity. On the beam near the entrance, someone once carved initials, looping, delicate. A rider's name, probably. Someone who rested here before the world forgot this place. You press your fingers to it. A strange hush falls. Even the wind quiets, as if listening. You move on. Toward dawn, the landscape flattens again. Marshy in places. You slow to a walk to let the horse drink from a spring. Its surface is like glass. You catch a reflection, smeared with sweat, wind, and pride. You're exhausted, but you're not done. Because the system isn't just roads and yurts and wax-sealed pouches. It's people. Riders, keepers, cooks, copyists, singers. Every one of them tethered to a larger vision. You're not just carrying messages. You're holding together an empire made of motion. And for tonight, just for now, that empire is in your hands. The air sharpens just as the sun lifts over the horizon, painting the plains with a dull gold that somehow feels older than the sky itself. You squint against the brightness, reaching instinctively for the hood of your deals, the long riding coat worn by Mongol couriers, always tailored with a secret inner pocket just large enough to hide a wax tablet or three. As you ride southward, the land turns flatter still, almost featureless, except for the random rise of hills like old bones beneath the steppe. This is where the Yam's true power becomes clear, not in its buildings or horses, but in the invisible lines it etches across the emptiness. You are following a route so deeply worn into memory that it no longer needs signs. Generations of hoof prints have mapped it into the land itself. Your horse stumbles slightly, nothing serious. But you dismount and check her hooves anyway. As you do, you notice a scrap of dyed cloth tied to a thorn bush, bright indigo, frayed, sun-bleached. It's a sign left by another rider, probably one day ahead. Riders often left such signals, coded by color and position, to warn of bandits, storms, or station closures. This one means strong winds, detour east. You untie it, acknowledging the message. No point confusing the next rider. Historians still argue whether this system of colored cloth markers evolved officially or sprang from the riders themselves. Some claim it was Genghis Khan's idea, others that it came from Turkic tribes long before the empire rose. Either way, it worked. Simple, silent, durable. You pivot east. A few hours later, you reach a station rebuilt after a fire. Charcoal still stains the outer wall, but the structure is solid again. You dismount, stretch, and hand off the goat hide pouch to the next relay courier. He's older than most, with deep smile lines and knuckles like knotted wood. He opens the pouch, inspects the seal, then gives you a subtle nod, the kind of approval that matters more than coin out here. He beckons you inside, where a small iron stove puffs away in the corner. Someone's boiling rice with garlic and sheep marrow, a smell that could resuscitate a half-dead rider. You eat in silence, only half listening as he tells you about a new relay hub being built farther east, near the Gene border. Stone foundations this time. That's the empire now, still nomadic at heart, but slowly rooting. You glance around the yurt and notice something curious, a small shrine tucked between two saddle racks, dedicated to the spirit of the road. It's just a bowl of salt, a polished stone, and a curved shard of horn. You ask about it. The keeper shrugs. Old thing. Some say it brings good footing. Then he chuckles. Or maybe it keeps the worst station food from killing us. Superstition? Maybe. But there's something oddly comforting about it. Outside, you brush your horse's mane while the wind shifts direction. Clouds begin to gather. It's the kind of weather that makes travelers hesitate, but Yam riders? You don't hesitate. You just tighten your coat and check your spare stirrup strap. Your next assignment is unusual, a closed loop. You'll deliver a fresh message to a border official, then return to this very station with his reply. Not every leg of the Yam is linear. Some are circular, designed for sensitive correspondence or urgent diplomacy. And the messages? Often coded, layers of metaphor or obscure dialect to mask meaning. You once carried a letter about apricot exports that turned out to be a war warning. This time, the message is written not on wax or bark, but a thin sheet of silk, rolled tightly and stitched into the hem of your coat. A practice borrowed from the Chinese, who had long known the value of hiding truth in textiles. The silk rustles slightly when you move, whispering secrets you don't understand. You kind of like it. On the way to the border, the terrain becomes patchy, wet earth split with animal tracks you don't recognize. You pause, studying them. Too large for wolves, too clean for bears. Probably steppe lions, someone told you once, though no one agrees if they're real. Riders share tales of the yellow ghosts, beasts that trail couriers for days without attacking, just watching. It's nonsense, probably. But still, you ride faster. At last, the border station looms, perched on a low rise and surrounded by prayer flags that snap in the rising wind. The official greets you with the formality of someone who rarely sees new faces. He checks your tablet and nods approvingly, then tugs open your sleeve hem to retrieve the silk scroll with the grace of a tailor. He reads it quickly, lips barely moving. Then, without a word, he produces another scroll, this one already waiting. He hands it to you with a faint smile and a piece of candied ginger. For the return ride, he says. You don't question it. The ginger is bitter and cloying, but it jolts your senses enough to cut through the long hours. On your way back, The clouds finally burst. Not a storm, more like a long, soaking drizzle that turns the world silver. Your coat darkens with dampness, your boots squelch, and everything smells faintly of wet wool and clean air. Visibility drops, but you press on. The return ride always feels different. Same path, same landmarks, but now every tree feels more familiar, every slope less steep. Even the burned-out station feels friendlier. By the time you return to the keeper, the fire inside the yurt is roaring, and someone's found a proper teapot. You hand off the new scroll, and he files it into a wooden chest sealed with rope and beeswax. Then he does something unexpected. He tells you a joke. Something about a rider, a goat, and a wrong turn near Karakoram. You barely follow the setup, but the delivery is perfect. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because laughter makes the cold leave your bones faster. Later, you sleep under a tangle of felt blankets, lulled by the hum of wind and the faint clatter of saddles being repaired outside. You dream of endless plains and invisible roads. And tomorrow, you ride again. Morning greets you not with trumpets or sun rays, but with the low, lazy mooing of a yak tied just outside the yurt. You blink into the gray light and realize your entire body aches in all the usual places. Knees, spine, something suspicious in your left shoulder. The smell of damp wool and wood smoke clings to you like an extra layer. But the tea is already steeping, and the next leg of your journey awaits. Today's route runs alongside an older trade artery, a dirt path that used to carry spices, herbs, and copper bells long before the yam formalized it. You follow it eastward, where the land begins to roll into shallow hills scattered with wild thyme. The air is thinner here, and your horse grunts under the strain, but she keeps pace. Soon, you pass a caravan in the opposite direction, 4 camels, 2 ox carts, and a woman perched on top of a crate of honey pots. She waves lazily and calls out, "Mail or meat?" You raise your wax tablet and shout, "Mail?" She nods and disappears over the ridge, vanishing into another life. This stretch of the yam is known for its double posts stations built unusually close together, sometimes only 20 kilometers apart. Historians still argue whether these were meant for convenience or protection. Some believe they were placed near sacred sites, others say it was purely about horse fatigue on steep gradients. Either way, they give you a curious rhythm: gallop, dismount, rest, gallop again. Like a heartbeat. Your first stop of the day is nestled in a shallow valley, guarded by a pair of totems carved with swirling knot patterns. Inside, the keeper is fast asleep, boots on, mouth wide open, holding a piece of dried pear. You nudge him gently with the toe of your boot, and he jolts upright, blinks once, then grunts and gestures for you to hand over the pouch. While he verifies the seal, you wander around. This station has a mini library, believe it or not, just 5 scrolls, all handwritten. One's a treatise on steppe birds. Another is poetry. The third is in a language you can't recognize. You finger the edges gently, careful not to smudge ink. Riders often borrow these during long rests. No one's sure who started the tradition, but it stuck. And next to the scrolls, something even more peculiar, a map made of felt, not parchment. The rivers are sewn in blue thread, the roads in dyed horsehair. You touch the texture lightly, it's soft but oddly precise. This isn't just for decoration. It's a traveler's guide, made to be folded, sat on, even used as a pillow if needed. You wonder who stitched it. You wonder if they're still alive. Back outside, you saddle a new horse. This one's gray with speckled legs and a habit of snorting at birds. You pat her flank and set off again. The next post isn't far, but between you and it lies the river Zek, a shallow but stubborn stream that winds through the high grass like a bored snake. There's no bridge. There never was. The Mongol approach to water crossings? Just go through. You strip your boots, tie your bag to your shoulder, and walk the horse across. The water is icy, shocking, and smells faintly of mint and mud. Your feet go numb before you're halfway. The horse doesn't seem to care. She makes it to the other side and shakes herself like a dog. At the far bank, a boy not older than 12 waits. He's the son of the next station's keeper, and today he's your temporary guide. His name is Batu, and he talks more than every courier you've met combined. "That's eagle feather up there," he says, pointing at the cliff. "Means good weather. Also means ghosts sometimes. Did you know we once had a rider who smelled like pickled onions? He made all the goats run away. I liked him. You let him chatter. It's soothing, in a way. You haven't heard a child's voice in weeks." Bata leads you to the station, where his mother is butchering a rabbit with the precision of a calligrapher. She nods at you without pausing, blood on her fingers, focus in her eyes. "Staying long?" she asks. 2 hours, you say. "Then you'll eat." she replies. Not a question. An order. You do. Rabbit stew with turnips and a piece of rock-hard bread you soften by dipping it into the broth. It's divine. Bada continues telling you about a legendary courier who rode 20 stations in a single moon cycle, only stopping to reshoe his horse once. He could whistle birds out of trees, the boy insists. Even the smart ones. Historians still argue about him, his mother adds. Some say he existed. Others think he was two riders switching outfits at every stop. That's the thing about Yim legends. They blur with practicality. You hear a story about a ghost rider who delivered messages from the dead, and then someone points out he was probably just a deaf courier who didn't notice when people yelled at him. Real? Not real. Doesn't matter. What matters is the ride. You stretch, refill your water pouch, and check the message, still sealed, still dry. The wax glows red in the late sun. One last leg today. Your last post before returning west. It's a newer station, built atop the ruins of an older one, and still smells of fresh earth and raw timber. The design is different, square instead of round, with a central fire pit and raised floors to prevent flooding. A hint of Chinese architecture lingers in the beams, a sign of the empire's evolution. The keeper here is a woman named Altai, blind in one eye and fluent in 4 languages. She looks at your saddlebag, nods, and says, I hope this one isn't poetry. I hate deciphering metaphors. You laugh. No idea. I don't read them. She tosses you a dry towel and says, you smell like the river. You bathe in a wooden tub behind the station, lukewarm water, lavender soap someone must have traded for from a caravan. The scent clings to your skin like an unfamiliar story. That night, you sleep in a hammock strung between 2 roof beams, lulled by the cracking fire, a quiet wind, and bad as ghost stories rattling around your mind. Tomorrow, you turn back. But tonight, you drift weightless above the steppe, wrapped in smoke, silk, and silence. Dawn doesn't so much arrive as seep into the wood grain. You wake before the birds, before the fire has entirely died out, and even before Altai stirs from her pallet near the hearth. Your breath fogs slightly in the yurt's cold air, but your body is oddly warm, muscles aching in that satisfied, half-healed kind of way. You swing your legs over the side of the hammock and touch the ground as if it might roll away beneath you. Today marks the return leg. You'll follow a different thread of the Yam, this one winding closer to imperial towns and larger hub posts, the big ones with stone foundations and actual courtyards. The contrast is sharp. From the lonely sentry stations of the plains to these bustling crossroads sanctuaries, the Yam is more than one thing. It's a spectrum. You mount a horse with braided reins. Someone took the time to weave charms into the knots. Good luck, or perhaps just habit. You set off east, the morning wind flattening your cloak like a sail. As you ride, you pass a trio of monks carrying scroll cases strapped to their backs. Their horses are mules, their sandals sturdy. One of them sneezes and offers you a dried apricot without breaking stride. You accept. It tastes like sun and dust and time. By mid-morning, you arrive at one of the Yam's true marvels, a central relay station that feels more like a village than a post. It's surrounded by a low wall, filled with barns, bunks, grooms, and even a tiny smithy. Children play by the well, a hawk circles overhead, and the scent of boiled millet drifts from a smoky kitchen window. You dismount and hand your reins to a boy with a cart full of saddle blankets. He eyes you with professional boredom. You've seen this face before, the veteran horseboy, 12 years old and already more responsible than any adult you know. Inside the post, a board lists names and destinations, a hand-carved itinerary, basically. Your name has a check mark next to it, and below it, return, 3 messages, 1 urgent. You ask about the urgent one. A clerk with an ink-stained beard points at a leather scroll case with a black wax seal. Deliver only to Governor Temujin in Karakoram. No substitutions. No delays. You sigh. Of course. The message is strapped tightly against your back, warm from your body heat, heavy with implication. You can't help but wonder, is it a warning? An update? A joke written in ciphers? Historians still argue whether messages like these contained genuine military orders, or whether they were decoys, misleading trails to confuse rivals. Maybe it's just a census update with terrible handwriting. You take your midday rest beside the communal fire pit, where a Persian scribe is telling a story about a Mongol who once tried to mail a goat. Not a drawing of one, not a report on one. An actual, living goat. I asked why. The scribe says, sipping his broth. He said it bleated the truth louder than any man. No one questions this logic. You continue riding that afternoon past a burnout station. Just a ring of stones, and a half-melted iron pot left in the grass. No one speaks of it, but someone's placed 3 pebbles on the center stone, a sign of mourning and memory. You add your own. It's customary. You don't know who burned it or why. Raiders? Lightning? A grudge from someone higher up the chain? You'll never know. The sun begins to angle low, casting gold over the vast plain, and in the distance you spot a herd of antelope moving like spilled tea across the horizon. For a moment, you forget about the scroll strapped to your back. By evening, you reach another post, this one older, creaking, wrapped in a tangle of vines. The keeper here is blind, but he recognizes your voice from a visit months ago. Still delivering nonsense for the Empire. He jokes, pouring you tea. You grin, still pretending it matters. He nods slowly. It does, just not always in ways you expect. He plays a 2-stringed Morin Kur as you eat a bowl of fermented rice and goat bits. The music is soft, hypnotic, meandering. You nearly fall asleep on your stool. Before bed, you step outside for air and see the stars are brighter than usual, the Milky Way smeared across the sky like spilled milk and secrets. You find the constellations riders use, the horse's tail, the 3 arrows, the hunter's eyelet. They're comforting in their absurdity. You think of the girl at Station 3 who always wrote poems in the margins of her ledgers, of Bada's rabbit stew, of the felt map and the sleeping keeper clutching dried pear. These details aren't part of the Empire's grand strategy, but they are the yam. Some say the postal roads were just a logistical marvel, horsepower and hierarchy. But you, galloping through starlight with dust in your lungs and one mysterious scroll against your spine, know better. They were lifelines. You fall asleep wrapped in your cloak, dreams tugging at your heels like puppies, the distant hoot of an owl marking the rhythm of your breath. You're back in the saddle before the frost has fully lifted. The air is sharp enough to bite, and your horse's breath streams ahead like a ghost pulling you onward. The road underfoot is firmer now, stamped with thousands of hoofbeats. This leg of the yam has been well traveled, an artery connecting something vital to something distant. The land opens up again, this time into a high, wind-battered plateau. You can see for miles, and what you see is more road, more posts, more riders. And for a moment, you realize just how interconnected this empire truly is. The Mongol postal system wasn't just horses and messages. It was a physical manifestation of control. You're not just moving through space. You're moving through imperial intent. And you are very much a part of that machinery, even if you still have a cramp in your left thigh and 3 blisters on your sword hand. Halfway through the day, you stop at a new kind of relay. A portable yurt station maintained by a nomadic tribe tasked with shifting the post depending on seasonal migrations. It's like chasing the mail on horseback across a board game that keeps changing the rules. You're greeted with fermented mare's milk and a fistful of dried fish. It's not your favorite combo, but hospitality is sacred here, and you smile through the flavor parade like a champion. Inside, the walls are plastered with illustrations of mythical creatures, some of which, suspiciously, resemble unusually shaped camels with too many teeth. Local warnings, the keeper explains with a grin, keeps the children inside at night. You pass the time sitting on a goatskin cushion while a teenage apprentice polishes his father's stirrups. He asks if you've ever seen Kublai Khan. You shake your head. He nods solemnly. Neither have I, but I bet he smells like pine. You agree, because that somehow feels correct. As the sun crests overhead, you reflect on something odd. For all the yam's efficiency, there was no universal postal code. Routes adapted to terrain, seasons, rebellions. Some messages were delivered in 2 days, others in 2 months. It all depended on horses, weather, and how much someone up the chain cared. Historians still argue whether Genghis Khan intended this chaos by design, or if it simply grew from necessity like moss on an old tree. You remount and continue. The message on your back hasn't been read, but you feel its urgency pulsing like a second heartbeat. You pass a caravan heading west, silk traders from Kashgar, their camels piled high with dyed fabrics and bundles of cinnamon. They wave, and you return the gesture, noting one of them wears a ring shaped like a coiled snake. Was that a symbol of allegiance? A warning? Or just a questionable fashion choice? By late afternoon, the landscape begins to change, hints of civilization creeping into the edges of the steppe. A monastery appears in the distance, roof tiles glinting gold in the sun. Rice paddies shimmer like green glass. Somewhere nearby, you hear a bamboo flute being played badly, and then a sheep bleats in protest. You reach another major station, this one with stone walls, tiled eaves, and a garden. Yes, a literal garden, complete with plum trees and a bench carved with cloud motifs. This is the sort of post reserved for higher officials, governors, royal messengers, and the occasional lucky courier like yourself. Inside, there's a bathhouse. You take a hot soak for the first time in weeks. The water smells faintly of cedar and something unidentifiable, maybe sandalwood, maybe someone's attempt at garlic soap. Your legs almost forget how to walk afterward, but it's worth it. That evening, you're seated in a candlelit dining hall next to an elderly woman who introduces herself as former courier, current poet. She tells you she once delivered a message through a snowstorm while being followed by wolves. You ask what the message said. She chuckles. Can't say, but it definitely wasn't worth it. Over dinner, rice, trout, and what might be roasted lotus root, she describes how different the routes were 50 years ago. We didn't even have saddle padding in those days, she says. We used to sit on brooms. Literally. Like some kind of postal witches. You laugh so hard you nearly spill your broth. Later, as you're preparing to sleep under an actual roof, you wonder about the hidden dangers of this network. Not the obvious ones, bandits, storms, wild animals, but the subtle ones, political intrigue, decoded secrets, falsified seals. There are stories of couriers disappearing, of messages altered mid-route, of relay keepers bribed to slow delivery. And yet, the system held, fragile, flawed, fiercely loyal. Like the people who wrote it. You stretch out under thick quilts, belly full, muscles still vibrating from the ride. Outside, the courtyard lanterns flicker. A cat strolls by like it owns the empire. Maybe it does. You think about that blind keeper, the goatmail story, the apprentice with Kublai sent theories. You think about the scroll pressed against your spine like a sleeping child. And just before you drift off, you realize you're not just delivering a message. You're becoming one. You wake to the smell of roasted barley and the muffled sound of chanting. It takes you a moment to remember where you are, the stone-walled post near the edge of empire, with plum blossoms on the windowsill and a courtyard cat that may or may not run the entire Yem network from behind the scenes. Today is not a day for wandering. Today, you're approaching Karakoram, the imperial seat, the magnetic center of all these winding postal veins. The scroll you carry pulses with significance now, or maybe that's just your back protesting after hundreds of miles. Either way, the capital is calling. You ride out beneath a sky polished clean by last night's rain, the road ahead smooth and unspooling like a ribbon. You notice that even the birds seem more organized here. Pairs of magpies hop along the fence posts like imperial inspectors. The route is lined with small wayfinding towers, stone cairns stacked high by passing travelers. They're a mix of offering and geography, guidance for the living, respect for the dead. You add a stone to one, because it feels right. Around midday, the terrain begins to shift. No longer just plains and hills, the ground undulates in manicured terraces, and the horizon grows jagged with rooftops and watchtowers. You pass a checkpoint guarded by imperial soldiers, their armor polished, their expressions unreadable. One of them eyes your scroll. Urgent, he asks. Only if you squint hard enough, you reply. He smiles faintly and waves you through. As you ride, you begin to pass other couriers, dozens of them. Some are dusty and exhausted like you. Others are fresh from a nearby post, barely winded. All of them carry messages, bundles, news. Some ride double-saddled for speed. Some have falcons perched beside them, backup plans for when roads are impassable. You realize you're part of a living nervous system, a web of motion and meaning. The Yam isn't just about distance. It's about persistence. You stop briefly at a post near the city gates where a young boy offers you a bowl of honeyed millet porridge and points at your saddle. Your strap's loose, he says. You thank him and retie it with numb fingers. You ever want to ride for the Yam? You ask. He shakes his head. I want to write the messages. The riding looks cold. Smart kid. Karakoram appears gradually, like a mirage that refuses to vanish. The first hints are sounds, gong-like bells, traders haggling, the shouts of stable boys. Then smells, roasting duck, wet parchment, manure, incense. And then, finally, sight, the walls, the banners, the gilded rooftops of palaces and temples. You enter through a gate carved with dragons, horses, and clouds, and the guards barely glance at you. A courier is as common here as a stray dog, and arguably more essential. Inside the city, the streets are lined with foreign merchants, Russians in fur hats, Persians in silk, Chinese craftsmen chiseling jade under umbrellas. You even spot an African diplomat, his robes a riot of color, examining a yurt with something between awe and concern. You weave through this tapestry until you reach the courier hall, a low, broad building with open doors and a polished seal above the lintel. Inside, it's quiet. Serious. The air smells of dust and ink and dry expectations. A clerk approaches. You show the scroll. His eyes widen just enough to betray its importance. This way, he says, without further explanation. You're led down a corridor lined with maps and into a chamber where Governor Temujin himself stands over a table, examining carved wooden tokens arranged in strange patterns. He's not the Khan, but he's someone who reports directly to him, and that's close enough to make your stomach flutter. You hand over the scroll. He breaks the seal, reads it in silence, then nods. Good time, he says. You were tracked from Station 12. Only 2 days late. That's acceptable. You resist the urge to ask what the scroll said. Instead, he hands you a small iron token with the image of a galloping horse. Official commendation, he explains. Show this to any yam station. You'll get priority service for the next moon cycle. And better soup. You bow. Much appreciated. Especially the soup. He chuckles once, a sound like boots on gravel, and turns back to his table. You leave the hall, token in hand, and step into the street just as the sun sets behind the palace rooftops, casting long shadows across the flagstones. You should feel triumphant. Instead, you feel quiet, because the message is delivered. But the road isn't over. You find a bunkhouse, tie up your horse, and sit by the fire, staring into the flames while a lute player plucks something melancholy and out of tune. You wonder how many scrolls you've carried in your life. How many mattered? How many were ever opened at all? Historians still debate how accurate Yam records were, whether messengers kept logs, whether messages were routinely archived, or whether whole decades of data simply vanished into the wind. You think of that blind keeper again, of the apprentice with pine-scented theories, of the goat that spoke the truth. And as the fire cracks, you realize something profound. The Yam didn't just connect cities. It connected moments, people, half-sentences spoken at midnight, meals shared between strangers, warnings carved into yurt poles, a poem scrawled on the back of a tax report. You sit with that thought, letting it stretch out like smoke across the sky. The road may be behind you, for now, but the story is still unfolding. You don't ride out the next morning. Instead, you linger, legs aching in gratitude, fingers still tracing the edge of that iron token as if it holds more weight than it should. You've delivered dozens of messages in your career, maybe hundreds, but this one felt different. Not because of what it said, because of what it connected. The Yam wasn't a path so much as a conversation. One you didn't start, one you'll never really finish. You wander through Karakoram's outer streets, where the smells of hot broth and open fires drift like banners in the wind. Vendors hawk everything from pine resin ink pots to Mongol stitched socks, which you're seriously considering because, frankly, your current pair could walk away on their own. The courier's quarters are quieter now. Only a few riders remain, patching up saddles, telling road stories, and washing out socks that almost certainly won't recover. You chat with a former Yam runner who claims he once delivered a message from Korea to the Caspian Sea in 49 days. You ask if he's lying. He shrugs. Probably, but it's a good lie. The Yam was full of good lies. Horses that flew, eagles that carried scrolls, ghosts at abandoned way stations. Every courier has their favorite. Yours might still be the goat that supposedly delivered a recipe for dumplings. You hope it's true. Back at the courier hall, you glance at the posting board. There are new assignments pinned up, scrolls destined for towns you've only heard about in fireside whispers. Balk, Nishapur, Khotan. There's even a call for someone to brave the mountain passes to Lessa. The notice includes hazard pay and a handwritten "Yikes" next to it. You trace the edge of the notice. You should rest more. Take a week. Visit your cousin near the river with the good dumplings and the bad poetry. But you already feel your body leaning forward. You talk with the stable master about your next mount. He raises an eyebrow at your token and offers a choice. You pick a gelding named Onion, because the alternative was something named Scorpion's Mistake. And honestly, that just feels like asking for trouble. Onion has a face like he knows secrets. You respect that. Before leaving, you pass by the message-copying chamber, where a dozen scribes dip brushes into black ink and transcribe scrolls at lightning speed. Some messages get duplicated and sent to multiple cities, triangulated intelligence, ensuring no news is lost. Others are encrypted, written in 3 languages, or sealed with 5 different codes. Historians still debate how secure the Yam actually was, whether information leaked like soup through an old yurt wall, or whether the Khan's secrets remained truly secret. There are records of rogue couriers, bribed keepers, and messages mysteriously altered mid-journey. And yet, the system endured. Flawed but functional, and deeply, unshakably Mongol. As you prepare to mount up, a boy hands you a wrapped rice cake, still warm. For the ride, he says. It's got honey and pine nuts. Careful, the pine nuts bite back. You thank him and stash it in your satchel next to a carved token from your last ride and the world's saddest harmonica, which you still insist you'll learn to play someday. You ride out in the late afternoon light, shadows stretching long, the city behind you murmuring like a sleepy giant. Ahead is open steppe again, vast and golden. A falcon passes overhead, circling once before gliding east. You follow. By nightfall, you've reached a small outpost you've never visited before, newly built, barely weathered. The walls are still pale, the hearth freshly stoked. You're greeted by a teenage girl with ink-stained fingers, who looks at your token, nods with an official air, and hands you a steaming bowl of lentils. Room's in the back, she says. We've got blankets. And a new poem on the door. Sure enough, scratched into the post is something someone left. Messages cross rivers faster than boats, but none outrun a joke well told. You smile. The poetry hasn't improved, but the effort is timeless. That night, curled in a corner of the yurt on a padded mat that smells faintly of wool and ambition, you stare at the roof beams. You think about the places this road touches, the secrets that ride its length, the laughter shared between total strangers over stale bread and shared purpose. The Mongol Yam wasn't just a communication system. It was trust, written on horseback. It was speed, braided into leather. It was the world's most improbable promise. I will get this to you, no matter what. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Because someone, somewhere, is waiting to hear something. And only you can bring it. The wind whispers low as you ride, brushing across the plain like a page being slowly turned. Onion, your horse, doesn't seem bothered. His ears flick now and then, more curious than cautious. You've left Karakoram behind again, but you carry something else with you this time, more than just a scroll. You carry knowing. Not in the scholarly sense. Not something you could write on paper and pin to a gate. No, what you've gained is quieter. It sits deep in your chest like the last embers of a well-tended fire. The kind that keeps you warm even when the road grows colder. The post stations feel different now. Not because they've changed, but because you have. At one stop, you help repair a broken yurt flap, nodding at the way that blind keeper showed you. At another, you give your stew to a new courier who just crossed the Gobi, face blistered, nerves shot. He tries to thank you. You wave him off. Pay it forward, you say. Each station is its own little world, part of a shared organism, alive and quietly extraordinary. You're offered a guest scroll, not mandatory, just something to carry onward for the sake of redundancy. Extra eyes on the road, the keeper explains. In case something happens, you accept. It's what Yam riders do. When the system works, no one notices. When it fails, everything does. As you rest one evening near the Kinai Mountains, you speak with a man who claims to be a former scribe from the Khan's palace. He now tends goats, which he says is less stressful. Letters don't scream when you milk them, he adds dryly. He tells you about an old policy. During emergencies, Yam stations would switch to 24-hour relay, where riders passed messages through the night by torchlight, like fireflies strung across the empire. That's when you see how alive it really is, he says. Like the empire has a heartbeat. Historians still argue whether those relay nights were sustainable. Some claim they were used only a handful of times. Others believe entire campaigns were built around their success. You believe it. You've seen enough. As you prepare for your final delivery, you pause at a station where a child offers you a carved wooden whistle. To scare off wolves, she says seriously. Or bad dreams. You thank her. The wolves you can manage. It's the dreams that linger. The final leg is short, a small town nestled in the foothills, not even marked on some maps. But the message is for someone important. Not a ruler. Not a general. Just a healer who once saved the life of a commander's daughter. She takes the scroll with weathered hands and reads it without expression, then nods. Thank you, she says. This matters. She offers you tea, and you accept. The two of you sit in silence. There's no ceremony, no speech, just two people, joined briefly by a sliver of ink and intention. And in that quiet, you realize the full shape of the thing you've been part of. The Mongol Yim wasn't built for glory. It was built for continuity. To whisper across impossible distances, still here, still listening, still connected. So now, as the road finally stills beneath you, let your breath soften and slow. The gallop has faded into memory. The posts, the scrolls, the ever-watchful horses, they shrink into the distance behind you like lanterns receding on a river's edge. You lie now beneath a star-smeared sky, a light breeze curling around the edges of your blanket. There's no urgency left in your limbs. No message to carry. Only the sound of wind in the grass, and the distant bark of a dog half asleep beside someone else's fire. The Yam endures, yes, but for tonight, it moves without you. Close your eyes and picture that great, invisible web stretching across the world. Yurts dotting the plains, quiet riders stirring embers back to life, scrolls tucked safely beside sleeping heads. The empire hums, but gently now, like a lullaby whispered between mountains. You've ridden far, far enough. You've done your part. Let the next rider take the torch. Let the scrolls wait till morning. Let the wind wrap itself around your dreams, soft and wordless. You're safe. You're home, wherever that may be. And the road will still be there tomorrow.